"Excuse me, ma'am, this table is reserved for paying customers." The voice sliced through the low hum of the restaurant like a knife through glass. Conversations halted mid-sentence. A fork clinked against a plate, then silence. Every eye turned toward the sound, toward her. She looked up slowly, not startled, not defensive, just calm. There was a quiet strength in her eyes, the kind that came from seeing too much, surviving too much, and learning long ago not to let other people's ignorance define her worth. She wore a simple white blouse tucked into faded jeans, her braids pulled back neatly beneath a soft scarf. A modest gold cross hung around her neck, glinting faintly in the sunlight that streamed through the window. No designer bag sat beside her, no expensive watch on her wrist, just a woman waiting patiently at a corner table with a half-empty glass of water in front of her. To the waiter, that wasn't enough. He didn't see her patience, her warmth, her composure. He saw only what he wanted to see, someone who, in his mind, didn't belong among the polished marble floors and glittering wine glasses of the upscale seaside restaurant. That was his first mistake. She met his gaze evenly. "I already ordered," she said, her voice calm, almost kind. "Just waiting for someone." He folded his arms, eyes narrowing slightly. "Well, maybe next time, wait outside. We don't like loitering here." There was a pause, long enough for the tension to crawl across the room. A man at the next table shifted uncomfortably. A couple whispered behind their menus. No one spoke up. No one ever did in moments like these. She took a slow breath, trying not to let the sting show. She had felt this before, in grocery lines, in elevators, in boardrooms where people assumed she was the assistant instead of the director. She had learned the art of silence, not because she didn't care, but because sometimes peace spoke louder than anger. "Sir," she said softly, "I assure you, I'm not loitering." But he wasn't listening. His voice grew sharper, laced with condescension. "Look, ma'am, we run a business here. If you can't afford..." She cut him off, still calm. "My card's already with your cashier. You can check." That silenced him for half a second, but pride wouldn't let him back down. "Well," he muttered, trying to recover, "I'll double-check. We've had issues before." His words hung in the air like smoke, heavy, bitter, impossible to ignore. She turned her gaze out the window, toward the ocean stretching beyond the glass. The sunlight glittered on the waves, calm and endless. For a moment, she let the sight steady her heartbeat. Inside, though, the atmosphere had changed. A mother at another table leaned toward her teenage son and whispered something, maybe an apology, maybe an explanation. A man in a suit pretended to look at his phone. Even the background music seemed to fade, leaving only the sound of her slow, steady breathing. When the waiter walked away, she exhaled quietly, forcing a smile to return to her lips. She reached for her phone, checking the time. 12:05. He was late, the person she'd been waiting for. But she wasn't worried. He always kept his word. She opened the messages on her screen, running a bit behind. "Don't move. I'll find you." Her heart softened at the words. The faintest smile played across her face, the first genuine one of the afternoon. She whispered under her breath, "You'd better hurry, Ryan." A few moments later, the waiter returned. "I checked," he said stiffly, "and, you did order." "Thank you," she replied simply, no sarcasm in her tone. He hesitated, perhaps expecting anger, perhaps hoping for it, anything to make himself feel less small. But all he saw was grace. Pure, effortless grace. Her hands folded gently on the table as she looked up at him again. "You know," she said softly, "you could have just asked nicely. Not everyone you meet fits the story you tell yourself." The words landed like a quiet truth, heavier than any insult could have been. The waiter blinked, caught off guard. I didn't mean to." "It's fine," she said, cutting him off with a gentle smile. Just, be kinder next time. And just like that, she let it go. But the room didn't. Even after he walked away, the tension lingered, not because of her, but because everyone watching knew what they'd just witnessed. They knew she'd been wronged, and they'd said nothing. Outside, the sea breeze picked up, carrying the scent of salt and sun through the open doors. Inside, Maya Daniels, the woman he had mistaken for a nobody, sat quietly, waiting for her world to walk through that door. She didn't know it yet, but within minutes, everything in that restaurant, every judgment, every whisper, was about to turn upside down. Because the man she was waiting for wasn't just another customer. He was Captain Ryan Cole, the Navy SEAL whose heart belonged to her, and whose presence would soon make the entire room remember the cost of judging too soon. An hour earlier, that same woman, Maya Daniels, had been driving down the coastal highway, her hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. The sun shimmered over the water to her right, painting the waves gold. The radio played softly, but she wasn't really listening. Her mind was elsewhere, thinking about him. It had been almost 8 months since she'd last seen Captain Ryan Cole. 8 months of silence, uncertainty, and fear. Every night, she'd pray for his safety. Every morning, she'd wake up and check her phone, hoping for a message, even a single line. Some nights she couldn't sleep, replaying their last goodbye, his uniform crisp, his voice steady, promising he'd come home. And today, that promise was finally being kept. He had texted early that morning, briefing ends at 11:30. I'll meet you at noon, same place as always. Just reading those words made her heart race. She didn't need fancy gifts or flowers. All she wanted was to see his face, hear his voice, feel that same warmth she'd missed for months. Maya had chosen her outfit carefully, simple but clean, something that felt like her. A white blouse tucked into light blue jeans, small gold earrings, and her favorite sandals. She tied her braids back neatly and added a touch of lip gloss before heading out. As she drove into town, the ocean breeze drifted through her open window. She whispered to herself, half smiling, "You better be on time, Captain." By the time she arrived at the seaside restaurant, it was only 11:30. The parking lot was filling up with tourists and locals dressed in summer clothes. The restaurant itself was beautiful, wide glass windows overlooking the waves, polished floors, and the faint sound of a piano playing inside. It wasn't her usual kind of place. She preferred quiet cafes, little family diners, spots where people smiled and meant it. But this place was special to Ryan. It was where he had taken her after his first deployment. She parked, adjusted her blouse, and walked in. The hostess smiled politely at first, but when Maya mentioned she was waiting for someone, the smile faded into a strained expression, the kind people wear when they're trying to decide if you belong. Sure, the hostess said, hesitating. Would you like to sit, at the back? Maya smiled gently. Actually, near the window, please. Of course, the hostess muttered, leading her to a corner by the glass. Maya sat down, ordered a glass of water, and placed her purse neatly beside her. She took a moment to steady herself. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, and for a while, she let herself get lost in it, the calm, the rhythm, the promise of something bigger than all the noise around her. She rehearsed what she might say when Ryan walked in. I missed you. Too simple. I prayed for you every night. Too emotional. Maybe she'd just smile and let the silence say everything. But then the sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. A man in a black vest and white shirt, the waiter, stopped by her table. He looked at her, not with curiosity, but with quiet suspicion. His smile was thin, polite in the way that wasn't really polite at all. Are you sure you're in the right place? He asked. The words caught her off guard. Excuse me? He gestured toward the entrance. This section's usually reserved for guests dining in. We can seat you near the bar if you're. She blinked, trying to understand. I'm waiting for someone. I've already ordered. The waiter's eyes darted toward her glass of water, then back to her face. Right. Just checking. His tone carried something heavier than rudeness, the quiet kind of disrespect that didn't need shouting to be loud. Around them, a few customers had turned to look, pretending not to stare. Maya's chest tightened, but she kept her composure. Years of dealing with situations like this had taught her the difference between reacting and responding. She smiled faintly. Yes, I'm sure I'm in the right place. The waiter paused, clearly realizing she wasn't intimidated. He gave a curt nod and walked away. As he disappeared into the kitchen, Maya exhaled slowly, her hands still resting on the table. She looked back out at the sea, letting the horizon steady her again. It wasn't the first time she had been made to feel small in places that claimed to be refined. She picked up her phone and opened her messages. Still no new text from Ryan. Just the same words, "Don't move. I'll find you." She smiled softly. "You always do," she whispered. Outside, a few seagulls circled the pier. Inside, the piano music resumed, gentle, elegant, and almost too perfect to fit the quiet storm inside her chest. The waiter passed by again, glancing her way, but this time, Maya didn't look up. She had nothing to prove. Because in less than half an hour, the man walking through that door, the one she had prayed for, the one who had faced war and come home, would remind everyone in that room who she truly was. And when that happened, not just the waiter, but the entire restaurant, would learn that dignity has nothing to do with appearance, and everything to do with heart. Minutes later, the front door of the restaurant opened, and the quiet hum of conversation shifted. Chairs creaked. Forks stopped clinking. Every head turned toward the entrance. A tall man stepped inside, sunlight spilling around him from the open door. He wore a pressed navy uniform, the dark fabric catching the light just enough to reveal every sharp line and crease. His broad shoulders carried a stillness that came only from discipline, and his calm eyes scanned the room with a soldier's precision, quick, alert, commanding. Even before anyone knew who he was, they could feel it, that air of authority, the presence of someone who'd seen danger and returned stronger. This was Captain Ryan Cole, freshly home from deployment. His gaze swept the restaurant once, then landed on her. And the tension in his face melted into the brightest, most genuine smile anyone had ever seen. "Maya," he called out. Every whisper stopped. The waiter who had mocked her froze mid-step, his face draining of color. Maya turned, her heart skipping as tears filled her eyes. She rose to her feet just as Ryan crossed the floor, his heavy boots echoing softly on the marble. When he reached her, he didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into a hug so fierce it spoke of months of fear, longing, and love finally reunited. The golden trident on his chest, the mark of a Navy SEAL, gleamed under the lights, catching the eyes of everyone in the room. The silence grew thick with realization. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "You made it." He smiled, his voice low but steady. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." For a few seconds, the world around them disappeared, no waiter, no whispers, no judgment, just two hearts finding their way back to each other. But when Ryan finally glanced around, his expression changed. He could feel the weight in the air. The uneasy stares. The guilt in some faces. The discomfort in others. His smile faded. His voice deepened. "Is something wrong?" The waiter stammered, taking a step back. And no, sir. We just thought she." Ryan's eyes hardened. "You thought what?" That question sliced through the silence like lightning. No one moved. Even the soft piano music stopped mid-song. Ryan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His tone carried the kind of quiet power that demanded attention. Years of command were etched in his posture, chin lifted, shoulders squared, gaze unwavering. You thought the woman who's been saving lives in the city hospital for 5 years wasn't good enough to sit here? His words landed heavy, deliberate. You thought she didn't belong? The waiter's lips parted, but no sound came out. Ryan took a step forward, eyes still fixed on him. Let me tell you something, he said, each word slow and precise. When I was deployed overseas, and bullets were flying past my head, when nights felt endless and hope seemed far away, do you know what kept me going? He pointed at Maya. Her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Maya blinked, her eyes shining as tears welled up again. She's the one who sent letters to the troops every week. She's the one who volunteered at the hospital on weekends to treat wounded veterans. She's the one who organized food drives for military families when their loved ones didn't come home. He took a breath, his jaw tightening. You see her skin color. I see the reason I'm standing here alive. The room was utterly still. Every word hit harder than the last. Ryan looked around the restaurant, his gaze sweeping across the tables. You all talk about honor and respect, he said quietly, but respect isn't something you save for uniforms or titles. It starts with how you treat people, every person, when no one's watching. For a heartbeat, no one dared to move. Then, from the bar, a single person began to clap, hesitant at first, unsure if it was appropriate. Another joined. Then another. And suddenly, the sound grew louder, spreading like a wave. Applause filled the room, genuine, powerful, humbling. Maya stood there, stunned, a hand pressed to her heart. The waiter's head hung low. His face burned red as he mumbled an apology that barely escaped his lips. Ryan looked back at him, his voice softening. You can do better, he said simply. Start today. The waiter nodded, eyes glistening. Ryan turned back to Maya, his expression soft again. Now, he said, smiling faintly, how about we finally have that lunch? She laughed through her tears. You just made sure it'll be one no one here ever forgets. As they sat down, the restaurant slowly returned to life, though nothing felt quite the same. Strangers smiled at Maya. A young woman at the next table whispered, "You're amazing." Even the pianist, now restarting his song, glanced over and nodded with quiet respect. And while the waves crashed gently outside, the man in uniform reached across the table, took Maya's hand, and whispered, "Never again will anyone make you feel small. Not while I'm breathing." She smiled softly. "I never needed you to fight my battles," she said. "Just to stand beside me." And that's exactly what he did. The manager came rushing over, his face pale and nervous. He wiped his hands on his apron and stammered, "Captain, I am so sorry for what happened here. This was completely unacceptable. I assure you, it won't happen again." He was nearly out of breath, tripping over his own apologies. "Your meal, it's on the house, of course. Drinks, dessert, anything you want." But Maya simply smiled, her calm presence steadying even the air around her. "That's kind of you," she said gently, "but we're good. Just treat the next person with a little more respect." Her tone wasn't angry. It was forgiving, and that, somehow, made everyone in earshot feel smaller than any lecture could have. The manager nodded quickly, relief and guilt flickering in his eyes. "Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. You have my word." Then he retreated, leaving the couple to finally have their moment in peace. Ryan reached across the table and took her hand in his. His grip was warm, solid, the kind of touch that said, "I'm proud of you. You always handle everything with grace," he said softly. Maya laughed, shaking her head. "Some things aren't worth losing your peace over." He smiled. "Still, it's time people learned who you really are." She tilted her head. "And who's that?" Ryan chuckled. The strongest woman I've ever known. The one who taught me that dignity doesn't have to be loud, it just has to stand firm. Maya looked down, hiding the small smile tugging at her lips. You always know what to say. As they began to eat, the tension that had hung in the room slowly melted away. Conversations resumed, though quieter than before. People stole glances their way, not out of judgment now, but of admiration. The story they had just witnessed was something no one there would ever forget. Halfway through their meal, a small voice broke the hum of the restaurant. Excuse me? They both looked up. Standing beside their table was a boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing a blue t-shirt and holding his mother's hand. His eyes were bright, filled with a mix of curiosity and awe. Ma'am, he said, almost whispering, my mom said you're amazing. Can I take a picture with you? Maya blinked, caught off guard. A picture? With me? The boy nodded eagerly. You stood up for yourself. My mom said that's brave. Ryan smiled and gestured toward him. Come on over, buddy. The boy ran around the table and stood beside Maya, grinning from ear to ear. His mother snapped the photo, mouthing a quiet thank you from across the table. Maya smiled, resting a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. Always remember, kindness is power, okay? The boy nodded, eyes wide. Yes, ma'am. As they watched the boy return to his seat, Maya leaned back, exhaling softly. You know, she said, if even one person walks out of here thinking differently, maybe that was worth it. Ryan nodded slowly. That's how change starts, one person at a time. Behind the counter, the waiter stood silently. He hadn't said a word since Ryan's speech. His head was lowered, his eyes glassy. Regret was written all over his face. He had been humiliated, yes, but more than that, he had been changed. Ryan noticed. When the bill came, though they hadn't ordered much, he signed the receipt, then stood. Maya followed. As they turned to leave, Ryan paused near the counter. The waiter straightened, bracing himself for more anger. But Ryan's voice was calm, almost fatherly. Son, he said quietly, the uniform doesn't make the person, respect does. He let the words hang there for a moment before adding, don't ever forget that. The young man swallowed hard, nodding. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Ryan gave a small nod back. Apologize not to me, but to yourself. Be better next time. Maya watched, her heart swelling a little. Even in correction, Ryan had grace, the same grace she tried to live by every day. They stepped outside, hand in hand. The sea breeze greeted them, cool and fresh, brushing away the heaviness of what had just happened. The sky had softened into shades of pink and gold as the sun dipped lower. Ryan glanced at her, his expression tender. You know, I don't think I've ever been prouder of anyone in my life. Maya smiled, resting her head lightly against his shoulder as they walked toward the pier. You fought wars out there, she said quietly. I just fought one in here. He looked at her, eyes shining. And you won both. She laughed softly. Maybe. But I think we both know the real victory isn't about proving anyone wrong, it's about showing them what right looks like. Ryan squeezed her hand. Then you've already changed the world, Maya. As they reached the end of the boardwalk, the waves crashed gently against the wooden posts below. Behind them, the restaurant glowed with warm light, a place forever marked by one afternoon when grace, love, and quiet courage spoke louder than prejudice ever could. Maya looked out over the water, her voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes, you don't need to shout your worth. You just need to live it. Ryan smiled. And you do, every single day. The camera of life seemed to pull back then, the couple framed against the sunset, two silhouettes standing strong against the world, reminding everyone watching that real strength doesn't come from power, it comes from heart. That moment didn't just end in the restaurant. It was only the beginning. Someone, sitting quietly at a nearby table, had recorded the entire thing, from the waiter's cruel smirk to the stunned silence when Captain Ryan Cole walked in, and finally, to that powerful embrace that silenced the whole room. The video was shaky, but real, raw, emotional, and impossible to ignore. By the next morning, it had spread across social media like wildfire. On TikTok, it hit 1 million views in just 6 hours. By nightfall, news outlets were picking it up. Man defends black woman from racist waiter, turns out she's his fiancée and a real-life hero, one headline read. People couldn't stop watching. In the comments section, thousands wrote things like, "That's what love looks like." Others said, "Respect doesn't need a title, it starts with how we treat people." There were hashtags trending for days, #RespectHer, #GraceUnderFire, #RealLove. Maya and Ryan's story had become something far bigger than a single restaurant scene. It was now a mirror, showing the world both its ugliness and its beauty, side by side. The restaurant released a public apology 2 days later. The owner himself went live on camera, his voice trembling slightly as he said, "We failed to uphold the dignity and respect every customer deserves. We are deeply sorry to Ms. Maya Williams and Captain Ryan Cole, and we're committed to learning from this." The waiter, overwhelmed by the attention, was suspended and later retrained by the management team. When he finally spoke publicly, he admitted, "That day changed me. I saw how one moment of prejudice can destroy someone's peace, and how one act of grace can heal it." But for Maya and Ryan, none of that mattered much. They didn't crave revenge or headlines. By the time the world was still buzzing online, they were already somewhere else, walking down the pier, hand in hand, with the ocean breeze sweeping through the night air. The waves shimmered beneath a sky streaked with gold and violet. Seagulls flew overhead, their cries carried softly by the wind. The chaos of the world, the comments, the headlines, the opinions, felt far away here. Maya looked up at Ryan and smiled. "So, Captain," she said playfully, "how does it feel to be home?" He squeezed her hand gently, his eyes soft. "Feels perfect," he said, "because I'm with the only person who ever saw me for who I really am." She chuckled. "You make that sound poetic." He grinned. "Well, you inspire poetry, Doctor." She shook her head with a laugh. "Oh, stop." But her laughter faded into something softer, more thoughtful. "You know, I used to think moments like that, the ugly kind, were just part of life. You endure them, move on, forget. But maybe some moments aren't meant to be forgotten. Maybe they're meant to teach." Ryan nodded slowly. "You didn't just teach them, Maya. You taught the world. That's bigger than any fight." They paused at the edge of the pier, watching as the last rays of sunlight slipped beneath the horizon. The air smelled of salt and promise. Ryan took off his cap, letting the wind ruffle his short hair, and closed his eyes for a moment, a man finally at peace. Behind them, the distant sound of waves crashing against the rocks seemed to echo softly, almost like applause from nature itself. Maya whispered, "You know what's funny? Everyone keeps talking about how strong I was in that restaurant. But the truth is, I wasn't trying to be strong. I just refused to let hate win." Ryan looked at her with quiet pride. "That's exactly what strength is." For a while, neither of them spoke. They just stood there, two silhouettes against the sea, their fingers intertwined, hearts steady. Back in the digital world, their story kept traveling. Teachers shared it in classrooms. Pastors quoted it in sermons. Even strangers on buses smiled at each other after seeing the video, reminded that kindness still existed. And somewhere, someone who once judged another person too quickly stopped, just long enough to think twice. As the evening turned darker, Ryan wrapped an arm around Maya's shoulders. "You changed the world today," he murmured. She smiled faintly. No, she said, we just reminded it how to see. The ocean breeze grew colder, but their hands stayed warm in each other's grasp. Behind them, the city lights began to sparkle, reflecting across the water like 1,000 tiny stars. And somewhere deep in that stillness, a truth lingered, simple, powerful, unforgettable. Never judge a person by what you see. Because behind every face, there's a story you don't know. And sometimes, that story can change the way you see the world forever.